He was the love of my life. When Luke Evans said those words at 46, the world finally understood why he had stayed silent for so long. The Hollywood star had hidden relationships with multiple men, faced threats from his own church, and carried secrets that could have ended his career before it even started. But in 2025, everything changed. A memoir, a confession, and one name he could not stop saying. This is the story of a man who chose love over everything, even when it cost him his family. Luke Evans came into the world on April 15, 1979, in Pontypool, Wales, and he grew up in Aberbargad, a small mining village in the South Wales valleys. He was the only child, and his parents were working-class people who did whatever they could to keep the lights on. His mother, Yvonne, worked as a cleaner. His father, David, was a bricklayer. In their Jehovah's Witness community, even the timing of his birth mattered. He was born on Easter Sunday, and to people around him that felt like a sign. Still, signs do not pay bills. Money stayed tight, the home stayed modest, and the biggest thing in the house was not comfort. It was rules. Those rules shaped everything. As a Jehovah's Witness kid, Luke did not just go to school and come home and play. Week after week meant meetings. It meant being watched. It meant being told what was allowed and what was dangerous. And it meant going door-to-door preaching, sometimes in rough weather, starting as young as 8. While other kids talked about birthdays, he learned to ignore them. Christmas was not a thing in his house. School events that felt normal to everyone else, like Easter gatherings and harvest festivals, were off-limits too. Even music could be a problem. He has talked about not being able to join the choir or take part in school shows when the songs were religious, because the line between faith and fun was never allowed to get blurry. So little by little, he grew up feeling like he was standing slightly outside the room, looking in. And then there was the part of him he could not explain yet, but he felt it early. Around age 8, he started noticing boys in a way that scared him. He once remembered a substitute teacher who was fit and stylish, and while other kids admired him for their own reasons, Luke felt something else, something he could not name out loud. The problem was, the doctrine he was surrounded by did not treat that feeling like a normal part of being human. It treated it like a serious sin. He read scriptures that described gay people as abominations, and that word did not sit on a page for him. It followed him around. It made him feel like his life had already been sentenced before he even understood who he was. He carried fear that if he ever admitted the truth, he could be cut off from family and friends. And he also carried the fear of eternal punishment, because the people he trusted most told him that was real. School should have been an escape, but it became another battlefield. Luke was bullied, mocked, and pushed into a corner in ways that made him feel dirty, like something was wrong with him. He remembered a maths class where the only open seat was next to him, and a boy refused to sit down, acting like he might catch something. Moments like that do not end when the bell rings. They hang on you. They teach you to shrink. And the cruel part was that he felt he could not even go home and tell the full truth. He was ashamed of the names he was being called, and he was scared that the same faith that ruled his house would turn his pain into another reason to judge him. Yet even while all of that was pressing down on him, another side of him kept trying to breathe. He had a big voice, and he loved performing. But the same world that demanded obedience also demanded silence from the parts of him that wanted the stage. So he kept his talent hidden as much as he could. He sang at home, in private, wherever he could feel safe for a moment. And that split became his daily life. One Luke on the outside who followed the rules and tried not to get noticed. Another Luke on the inside who wanted to sing, who wanted to be seen, who wanted to stop lying with his body and his eyes. As he moved deeper into his teens, he started to understand something painful. Staying inside the Jehovah's Witness world meant choosing the church over his own life. It also meant risk for the people he loved, because coming out could have meant expulsion, and shunning that would hit his parents too. So he hid for years, partly out of fear, and partly because he was trying to protect them. But hiding has a cost. It eats your days slowly. And eventually, he reached a breaking point. At 16, he left the religion, and he also left school. It was not a loud rebellion. It was a slow decision built out of shame, fear, and the knowledge that he could not keep pretending forever. Leaving meant losing the only community he had ever known. It meant stepping into a life with no clear map. Still, staying would have meant living a lie, and he could not do it anymore. From there, everything became survival first, dream second. He left his hometown and went to Cardiff, and then around age 17, he settled in London with almost no connections and very little money. London can swallow you when you arrive alone. He lived modestly, shared small flats, and took odd jobs to keep going. He waited tables. He did whatever work showed up. He felt overwhelmed and anxious at times, but he was also determined to build a life that did not crush him. He started finding ways into theaters and bars, not because it was glamorous, but because it was close to the world he wanted. Every long shift, every low-paying job, every awkward conversation with strangers, it all became training in a different way. He was learning independence the hard way. Then musical theater became his lifeline. Back in Cardiff, he had attended stagecoach drama classes, which helped sharpen what was already inside him. In London, he pushed harder, and he won a scholarship to the London Studio Centre. The work was intense. Singing, dancing, acting, again and again. Long hours that demanded everything. But the difference now was that the effort did not feel like punishment. It felt like purpose. He graduated in 2000, and by then he was no longer just running away from his past. He was running toward something. London also gave him something else he had never really had before: space to breathe as himself. In the theater world and in club scenes, he met openly gay people and saw a kind of freedom that felt shocking at first. It was not just nightlife or fun. It was proof that a different life was possible. The theater community started to feel like a new family. People were not perfect, but there was acceptance. There was creativity. There was a place where he did not have to keep his head down all the time. That shift mattered, because when you grow up believing you will be punished for being honest, acceptance does not just make you happy. It helps you heal. Work kept coming, and the grind was real. He stepped into West End life where 8 shows a week is normal, and where stamina is not a nice bonus. It is survival. In 2000, he appeared in La Cava, playing Theo, and he started building a reputation for strong vocals and presence. He worked in Miss Saigon as Chris Scott, a role that demanded emotional weight and vocal power, night after night. Then there was Avenue Q, where he was part of the ensemble and also understudied, stepping into roles like Nicky and Trekkie Monster. Comedy timing, quick changes, constant focus. Meanwhile, auditions never stopped. Rehearsals never stopped. The days blurred, but his skills sharpened. In 2002, another big moment arrived. He was cast as Billy James in Taboo, Boy George's musical, which premiered at the Venue Theatre in London's West End. The show leaned into the 1980s club scene, edgy and controversial, and Luke stood out with energy that felt real. Around that time, at age 22, he also gave a candid interview to The Advocate. He spoke openly about being gay, and he said, "Everybody knew me as a gay man, And in my life in London, I never tried to hide it. That kind of honesty was not common for actors trying to climb, and it made people pay attention for more than one reason. But the past has a way of finding your address. As his stage career grew, word traveled back to the Jehovah's Witness elders in Wales. His success and his sexuality reached the community he had left. They wanted to talk to him about his choices. By then, he had already built a different life, and he was no longer willing to hide or deny himself. It became a final severing from that world. And even when you know you made the right choice, losing people and losing a whole community still hurts. He kept moving anyway, because by that point, he understood something simple and brutal. You cannot go back to a cage just because it is familiar. Years passed with theater as his backbone, and mainstream fame still felt far away. Then the shift came later than most people expect. In 2010, at age 31, he landed the role of Apollo in Clash of the Titans, a film that grossed $493 million worldwide. It was his first major film, and it changed the direction of his life fast. In 2011, he played Aramis in The Three Musketeers, training for sword fighting and horseback riding for weeks, working inside a big cast and a huge production. Around that same time, he appeared as Zeus in Immortals and had to train hard to match the mythic look beside actors like Henry Cavill. He had to prove himself quickly, because a late start can feel like a clock ticking in your ear. He has even said he felt lucky he had already been going to the gym before these roles, because suddenly the roles demanded a body that looked like it belonged in legend. Then came the part that made him a global face. In 2012, he was cast as Bard the Bowman in the Hobbit trilogy. He trained in archery for hours every day, so he could move like a seasoned archer and shoot accurately. The trilogy was filmed in New Zealand over 18 months, and that meant long stretches on set, heavy costumes, makeup, and constant work. The films grossed over $2.9 billion worldwide, and overnight, he was no longer just a respected performer. He was someone fans around the world recognized. Conventions followed. Interviews followed. The pressure followed too, but so did the opportunities. In 2013, he joined the Fast and Furious world as Owen Shaw in Fast and Furious 6. The role demanded serious physical training. He worked with stunt coordinators for months, learning martial arts, weapons handling, and vehicle stunts. The action was huge, including sequences where cars flipped through the air with a specially designed vehicle. He did many of his own stunts, and during a fight scene with Dwayne Johnson, he ended up with a cracked tooth. The film grossed over $788 million worldwide, and his place in the action world was locked in. Then he took the lead. In 2014, he headlined Dracula Untold and went through months of training to keep a sculpted physique for shirtless scenes. He followed strict routines, sometimes spending 2 to 3 hours a day in the gym. The production itself pushed him too, including action scenes built around the idea of fighting through 80-plus soldiers in a single corridor. He did a lot of his own stunts again, sword fights, movement, choreography, the whole thing. The film grossed over $217 million worldwide, and whatever doubts people had about him carrying a movie started to fade. Still, success does not erase insecurity. In fact, sometimes it gives insecurity a bigger microphone. Luke has admitted to having terrible anxiety about his body. He has talked about looking in the mirror and seeing flaws, even when the world sees someone fit and confident. Aging in an industry obsessed with appearance can make the pressure feel endless. He has said he is trying to be kinder to himself, but the pull of that pressure does not just disappear, especially when your career keeps asking you to look a certain way to stay in the game. Then, in 2017, he took a role that pulled his early theater life back into the spotlight. He became Gaston in Disney's live-action Beauty and the Beast. He was approached by casting director Ellen Chenoweth, and he auditioned by singing Gaston for director Bill Condon. The role demanded everything at once: singing, dancing, comedy, action. He worked closely with costume teams, down to small details like an antler-shaped ring and stitching choices, because Gaston is built out of details. He also had strong chemistry with Josh Gad as LeFou, and together they made scenes pop with punchlines and energy. The physical side was punishing too. He has described the costumes as heavy and hot, and filming big musical sequences could feel like an endurance test. There was even the challenge of doing Gaston in a long, continuous take, belting while moving through a packed tavern with all the timing and chaos that comes with a crowd. Then came the final fight scene with the Beast. Weeks of rehearsal and choreography. He came out sore and exhausted, but proud, because he did not treat it like a simple job. He treated it like a craft. That role also did something else. It reminded people he could really sing. The soundtrack was a major success, and his performances in Gaston and the Mob Song brought attention back to his voice. That momentum carried into his music path, and in 2019 he released his debut album, At Last, leaning into classic standards and show tunes. Then he took that voice on the road, including a 2020 UK tour. It felt like a full-circle moment, because the foundation was always there. Years of live performance, years of discipline, years of learning how to hold a room. Luke Evans stepped into music in a serious way on November 22, 2019, when his debut studio album At Last arrived and showed people something they had not fully heard from him before. He had spent years as a stage and screen actor, but this time he wanted his voice to lead the whole moment. The album was recorded at SARM Studios in London, and he worked closely with producer Steve Anderson, the same name linked to artists like Pet Shop Boys and Kylie Minogue. Then he went even bigger and brought in the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, so the sound could feel wide, warm, and cinematic without losing the human edge underneath it. The tracklist held 12 songs, and he leaned into covers that already carried strong emotion, then reshaped them with his own weight and tone. Songs like Changing and Show Me Heaven were not treated like safe nostalgia. They were treated like stories that still hurt a little, stories that still matter. That approach landed with listeners, and at last climbed to number 11 on the UK Albums Chart. It also earned a silver certification from the BPI, which quietly confirmed that this was not a side hobby or a one-time experiment. Evans kept saying it was personal, and you could feel why. He was not chasing perfection. He was chasing connection, trying to pull raw feeling out of each line and make it sound honest. After that release, the way he performed live started to reveal another layer of him. People who only knew the tough roles saw a softer presence on stage, the kind that slows down and looks you in the eye. He began doing concerts and television performances that leaned into romance, heartbreak, and vulnerability, and he did not rush through the emotional parts. In 2022, he headlined a special concert in Wales called Showtime, and the night became more than just singing. He shared the space with guests like Leanne Rimes and Ollie Murs, and he also brought in the Treorchy Male Voice Choir for Callan Lan, letting the sound carry his roots right into the middle of the show. Between songs he spoke, not in a scripted way, but in a way that made it feel like he was letting people closer. He talked about love. He talked about heartbreak. He talked about getting back up again. That mix of story and song slowly became his signature, and the audience did not just watch, they listened. That same openness showed up in the interviews where he talks about the soundtrack of his life. He would pick songs tied to turning points, and the pics were never random. They were linked to moments that shaped him, moments that still left a mark. One story he has shared again and again is about Roberta Flack's "The First Time Ever I Saw Your Face." He said he sang it at 16 and won a scholarship for musical school, which is why it stayed so meaningful to him. When he speaks like that, you start to see what music did for him long before fame. It became a way to survive hard days and also a way to reach people who felt alone in the same way. As he kept performing and talking more honestly, that honesty kept building towards something bigger. His memoir, Boy from the Valleys, released in 2024, pulls back the curtain on what it cost him to become himself in public. The book was inspired by candid BBC radio conversations, and it goes into his strict upbringing as a Jehovah's Witness, his struggles with sexual identity, and how music became a place where he could breathe when everything else felt tight. Writing it was painful, but also freeing, because it meant reopening memories he had carried for years and finally naming them. In a strange way, the stage had already been training him for that. Each concert story, each personal moment between songs, it was like practice for telling the truth without hiding. That truth was complicated even earlier in his career. Back in 2002, when he was 22, he gave an interview to The Advocate and said he was a gay man, and that he had not tried to hide it in his life in London's West End theatre scene. At the time, that kind of openness was celebrated in the community around him. But when Hollywood entered the picture, the tone around it shifted. Publicists and headlines treated it like a problem to manage. Over the years, media outlets kept feeding the public confusion, running headlines that questioned whether he was gay, straight, or something else entirely, especially as reports floated around about relationships with men and also a female publicist. Evans did not rush to label himself, and that only made the noise louder. Through all of it, he kept returning to one idea again and again: privacy. He has said, "There's a clue in the title, it's private." And he has explained that as an actor he needs some mystery too, not to play games, but to protect his life and the people close to him. That choice also came from reality. Being an openly gay man in Hollywood, especially while taking on action lead roles, was often treated as risky. Studios in the early 2000s had a long history of discouraging actors from coming out, worried about audience perception and typecasting. Evans has said being gay has not hindered his career, but the pressure and the timing still shaped what he shared and when he shared it. His love life became part of that public storm as well. In 2014, his relationship with Spanish model John Cortajarena went public and quickly became high profile, with the two being photographed at fashion weeks, premieres, and luxury trips, including Mexico in December 2018. But careers pull people apart, and constant travel does not care about romance. By 2016, breakup rumors were already moving around, and Evans later confirmed he was single in a 2016 interview with The Advocate, pointing to the strain of long-distance life and busy schedules. After that, he was linked to Colombian actor Victor Turpin in 2018, with fans spotting them together, including moments around a Mexico beach vacation that same year. And that relationship reportedly ended quietly in early 2019. Then in summer 2019, he began dating Rafael Olara, an art director, and they went Instagram official in January 2020. That relationship also ended later, with Evans confirming the split in 2021. And again, the same pattern showed up: work, distance, time slipping away. Then something steadier arrived. His relationship with Fran Thomas became public in December 2022 when they attended a gala together in St. Bart's, even though they had been together for years before stepping into public view. Thomas is described as grounded, and Evans has spoken about how much he values that balance. He has called him his best friend, described them as a great team, and said the relationship feels supportive in a way that helps him stay focused and calm. He has also talked about wanting to start a family, with hopes of having children within the next 5 years. That desire for stability makes even more sense when you look back at what he lived through as a kid. Evans has spoken about intense homophobic bullying during his school years in a Welsh mining village. Classmates called him Jovi Bender, a cruel label tied to him being a Jehovah's Witness, and also being seen as gay before he even understood what that meant. He has described how kids refused to sit next to him, even when it was the only seat available, leaving him feeling dirty, like he had a disease. He has remembered being isolated in maths class, with no one to talk to, and being hit with constant verbal abuse. He also said he felt he could not tell his parents because he feared rejection tied to their religious beliefs. That kind of fear does not disappear quickly. It sinks into you. He has written that as a child he started analyzing everything about himself, his voice, his mannerisms, his body language, trying to understand why he was being targeted. He would ask himself if his voice sounded different, if he seemed slightly effeminate, if a single gesture could invite another attack. It became daily self-monitoring, the kind that creates anxiety that follows you into adulthood. Even now, he has spoken about anxiety around his body and appearance, saying on the How to Fail podcast that he can go to the gym and still feel overwhelmed in the mirror, hearing thoughts like, "You don't look good enough," or feeling like he is letting himself go, as he notices wrinkles and stubble turning gray. His family life also carried its own turning point. After he became famous and openly gay, he has said church elders told his parents to cut contact with him. His father pushed back in the congregation with a blunt defense that showed love in real action, asking who put petrol in the car, who paid for the electricity, who paid for the food in the fridge, and pointing out that it was their son. That moment mattered because it showed the bond holding, even with pressure coming from every side. Over time, Evans began taking more control of the story people kept trying to write for him. He has spoken more in interviews, he has pushed into advocacy, and he has used his memoir to reclaim his narrative in a fuller way, showing the space between authenticity and self-protection instead of pretending it was simple. In November 2024, he appeared on BBC Radio Wales and talked about growing up gay in a conservative Jehovah's Witness household in South Wales, and about how he hid parts of himself for years to protect his family from being shunned. His memoir, described as Boy from the Valleys, My Unexpected Journey, was released in April 2025, and he has framed his story as one of hope and resilience, saying that even though he began as a bullied child in a small village, he fought for his identity and dreams, and that he is content now. And then it circles back to that quieter future he keeps mentioning now: fatherhood. In interviews around July 2025, he said he wants to become a father within the next 5 years, and that at 46 he finally feels ready, emotionally and financially, to slow down and focus on raising children. He has spoken about considering adoption and surrogacy, and about how building his career first helped him feel prepared for what comes next.